Okay, good. So, hi.
Hi,
To
Heather. Nice to meet you.
It is nice to meet you. We've had a lot of emails to get here, but here we are. So,
Yeah. Well, I
um,
feel for you having to do this in the middle of the night to try and accommodate me.
no, I mean it's part of the fun, right? It's like, the slumber parties that we don't get to have because of COVID. So these are all the wild nights at conferences and things like that. I don't know whether we get anyhow, but
Yeah, sad.
mhm. But it's what we have. So here we are. To start off, would you like to say your name and where you are?
Yeah, so I'm Kathy Logie and I'm currently in Subiaco in Perth, in Western Australia.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And what do you do there?
Well, I live in Fremantle, which is a really funky little town down by the coast. And I've lived there for about 20 something years. I raise my kids and I go to work. I work for a really lovely community services organisation.
Hmm.
And I have my partner and his kids and friends and nature. Yeah, it's a simple life. It's nice.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Lovely. So, the first big question is, who are you? Who are you as a person, as a human being? Your interests, your values, your passions, whatever you'd like to share.
Mm. I've been thinking about this, of course, because I've been watching other people's interviews. They've been so great, actually. They've really inspired me, Heather.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's a big question, that one, isn't it? And I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is I'm I'm a busy person. I'm a busy person, and I'm a bit of a lover and a fighter. So I'm passionate. I don't really let things slide. I kind of I tend to things, which keeps me quite busy. And sometimes that goes well, and sometimes it doesn't go so well. But that's definitely a strong part of my character, is to be quite a passionate, involved person.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I suppose how that translates is like I'm a busy mum. I've raised 4 children, probably the most gorgeous thing I've ever done, and also the most challenging. um, and I've worked all the way through that and studied. So yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Mhm.
And I work in areas where I'm doing support work. Um, so at any one time, there's like 100 people on my mind, I guess. And I've got really used to that. And
Mhm.
I actually love it. Yeah, I love it. But it is a lot. Like that is something about me always takes on a lot.
Hmm. So, when you say a lover and a fighter, what are you loving and what are you fighting these days?
Yeah, great question. I love nature. I love Indigenous culture. And in fact, I really feel bad because I wanted to start this interview with an acknowledgement to country, which is something that we do here in Australia.
Hmm.
So maybe I can backtrack and do that because I'd like to include that. Um, so Wanju Wanju Wajak Nunga Buja, which is essentially just a way of kind of opening up to acknowledging that I'm holding this meeting on Wajak Noongar land,
Mhm.
which is a very beautiful Aboriginal culture that we have here in Perth, in southern states of Perth. So that's something that really impacts me in a deep way, is trying to learn as much as I can about our local traditional cultures. And unfortunately, in Australia, our First Nations people have been really dispossessed, disempowered. It's been quite appalling, actually. So I guess that's one of the areas that my love and fight comes in together.
Mhm.
Um, I really love supporting their culture to kind of grow and be more recognised. And at the same time, I find it really upsetting that they are still incredibly disadvantaged people. Um, And yeah, so in my work, that's something that is a strong theme, is trying to work with Aboriginal people. And that includes kind of decolonizing myself and learning about having a different viewpoint, which is something that I feel is very valuable, really important, and a deep process. I'm just wondering, how's the sound on your end? Is everything okay?
Yeah, it's coming through fine.
Okay, great. Good.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's one thing. What else do I love? I love the process of being a mum and learning to relate to my children. You know, learning to respect their opinions and their pathways and their unique kind of take on life. I think that's probably been one of the most influential experiences that I've had. And that relates to Gestalt for me, because I don't think I could have parented without having done the Gestalt training.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how people do that.
Honestly, like I use it. I use my Gestalt sort of skills so intensely every day, just to kind of keep harmony in the family and to keep connected with my kids, you know.
It's ego, hunger, and aggression, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's that thing of, you know, like being able to validate that they're unique people and that they have their position in the world and they have what they want. And it's not necessarily what I want. Like, it doesn't really matter what I want. What matters is, can I connect with them and can they tell me about it? And can I help them to kind of be the sort of person that they want to be? So that's been a really valuable process for me. Yeah, they're really lovely kids, actually.
So I'm sitting here with, you know, the word decolonizing yourself, but maybe we'll come back to that in a little bit. That's an interesting verb, I guess.
Yeah, it's really powerful. Yeah.
Do you want to say anything more about that, or?
Yeah, I suppose really what it's about for me is about acknowledging our privilege, you know, the white privilege that I carry, and particularly within Australia, the way that white men and white women took the babies off Aboriginal people and raised them as though they were more worthy of having those children. And now we live with this sort of intergenerational effects of what that does to people. But unfortunately, the majority of white Australia doesn't acknowledge that that was a real thing. And so for me, I kind of feel like it's almost a duty to carry that every day in everything that I do. Because how can you expect people to come back from that? And how can we walk around feeling like we are entitled to do that? So I think, yeah, for me, decolonizing is a process of recognizing entitlement and feelings of superiority, and just realizing that that's a fantasy. You know, it might be a construct, like a social construct, but it's not. We're no better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that comes with a lot of shame and a lot of guilt, a lot of confusion. And I think in Australia now we're in a process of only just starting to touch on that and what you do with those massive feelings. So yeah, I'm trying to be as involved in that as I can, because I just don't see how anyone can be mentally healthy, how we can be a cohesive, happy, productive community when there's that huge injustice that's been not addressed. Yeah.
And it's a very similar situation in Canada with, you know, people beginning to recognize, you know, we're sitting on land that we have no entitlement to.
Yeah.
And historically, intergenerationally, we have done things we were not entitled to do.
Yeah. And kind of stolen it all.
Stolen and hurt and all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, so for example, I mean, like we in Australia, we've lost so much beautiful knowledge because we dismissed the Indigenous cultures completely. Like we classified them as flora and fauna. until 1967.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Non-persons.
the whole premise of Australia being settled was on the basis that there was nobody lived here. That's what they reported back. So to kind of recover some of the culture is so important, and some of the languages. So for example, like we have this, I'm going to show this now, but like we have 6 seasons in, yeah, we have 6 seasons here. So, and that'll be particular to this region. So at the moment we're in Jilba, which is cold and not too much rain, but we're about to go into Camberang, which is when it starts to get warm and the rain's finished. And it's like, instead of sort of imposing the 4 European seasons on a landscape that doesn't actually match that, the Noongar people know how to sort of work the seasons out based on what happens in nature. And I just think stuff like that, I just love stuff like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So another question for you about a little bit of your own personal history is whether you identify, or what comes to mind as an event or a set of circumstances in your life that has really shaped you or influenced who you are or how you are in some particular way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is where Gestalt comes in for me. Gestalt's probably the best thing I've ever done in my life. Like, it's the thing I'm the most proud of. Like, my training is probably the one thing that I've completed and feel absolutely accomplished in. It's also given me skills to do all of the other work that I do. So yeah, Gestalt's definitely a time of significance, like coming in contact with Gestalt and realising that it was something that I could undertake as a career pathway, as a training, as a personal kind of commitment. Another thing that I think is quite significant is that I carry out my Gestalt work under the guise of a peer support worker. So, some people are aware of this kind of work, others aren't. It's still reasonably new. But particularly in the mental health sector, we employ peer workers. And so a peer worker, by definition, is someone that utilises their lived experience of going through challenges to then support others that are going through similar challenges. So at around the same time that I started my Gestalt therapy for my own personal sort of support, I'd just been employed as a peer worker to facilitate self-help groups for women. And it was kind of the simultaneous discovery of peer work and Gestalt work that, oh, sorry, my lights just went out, might be better. Yeah, so putting those two together has been probably the most powerful sort of events of my life, because they've led me to my work, but they've also led me to my happiness, to my actual, yes. So I suppose, how do I explain that? When I started facilitating groups for women, I really didn't have very many skills. I was kind of naturally good at it, but I didn't have qualifications and I didn't have that many skills. And I realised pretty quickly that I needed a good therapist to help me with the work I was doing. So I accidentally found a Gestalt therapist, and that kind of commenced my explorations into Gestalt at the same time as I was developing my skills as kind of a mental health support worker. And I don't think I could still be doing this work 15 years later if I didn't have Gestalt as a background framework. If I was just relying solely on the mental health kind of paradigms, I think I would have burnt out long ago. So those two events in my life have been really, really significant. And yeah, they're really important to me.
Okay. And has there been a particular person who has crossed your life, either, before or after or in Gestalt, who's had a big impact on you?
Yeah, well, I mean, my very first therapist, or really my main therapist, I suppose, is Hank Glory. He's based here in Perth. And I mean, essentially in the beginning, he was my substitute dad. I didn't know that he was a Gestalt therapist. I didn't know what Gestalt was. I really wasn't doing that well. And he was so nice to me, it reached me. And then I worked with him for many years, like many, many years. I did therapy with Hank. And he was the one that suggested that I study the training course. And to be honest, Heather, that sort of thing had never really crossed my mind. I had pretty small ideas of what I was capable of back then. And so, yeah, I'm really grateful to Hank for sort of suggesting that. He was honestly like, Kath, you're going to be in therapy for a long time anyway, so you may as well do the training.
That's a really nice way of saying
it. Yeah. But then you've interviewed Zish Zimbinski, and he was one of my trainers, him and Claudia, and also Kenyo. And they run the Gestalt Institute here in Western Australia. And I mean, we are pretty remote. We're pretty far away from the rest of the world. So we're just so lucky to have a Gestalt Institute, and they were great. They were amazing. So yeah, I'm really super indebted to them, actually, yeah, as people. Yeah.
And what is it that you found in Gestalt? What is the thing that attracts you or has kept your attention?
Well, it's so difficult to capture what that magic is, hey? It's so difficult. But I guess it's I think the first thing that really grabbed me was the paradoxical theory of change. Because essentially when I came to Gestalt, I was broken. I was a broken person. I'd had a really tough childhood and adolescence, and I was struggling. And I'd spent so many years trying not to be struggling. And then I came to therapy, and Hank said, "You seem so sad." And I realized I was. And it was that simple. It was like something to work with then, instead of constantly trying to push it away and change it and be better. I think just
so waiting to get better is awful.
Isn't it? It's just, and it actually just increases the suffering. So I think that must have been my first, that was really powerful for me, was to accept where I was at, and then to realize that actually it's not set in stone, that I have some choice there, and that the more awareness I have about myself and my process and what I feel and what I go through, the more choices I have. And so that was very enlivening. I think also it's just the dialogical approach. Unfortunately, when I was younger, I got caught up in the sort of psychiatric institutions, and I got very damaged by that kind of medical approach and diagnostic approach, and it's sort of inhuman in some ways. And so when I came to Gestalt, and there was no talk of what my diagnosis was. And I remember asking several times, like, what is it? What is it that I need to know about myself? And it would just be like a conversation. It wasn't an assessment. And I think that really, really helped me to see myself in a different light, to break some of that stigma that I was carrying about myself, I think. And then it was the humanness of it. It was the fact that every person that I talked to that had been involved in Gestalt had areas of their life where there was something a little bit wonky, and they weren't mortified by that. And it kind of let me...
We've all got our issues.
We've all got our stuff, and it helped me to feel relaxed. It brought my anxiety, like my general anxiety about life, it just brought it down so that I could start to engage with my life and not be kind of frozen in fear and shame. So yeah, I think, Gestalt's been hugely significant for me. And I think also just seeing older people with lots of energy made me feel very hopeful. And that idea that the more we try and sort of hold something down in ourselves and don't let it emerge and don't let anyone see it, we use so much energy to do that. And that if we can actually accept ourselves and really know ourselves and be ourselves, we've just got so much more energy. And I really do find that to be true down the track now. Yeah. And, you know,
Well,
some of those older trainers and, you know, the Gestalt legends that you've been interviewing, you know, they're inspired and they're still passionate. They've got a life force energy that really attracts me.
yeah, I mean, for me, some people are just like, they're just walking balls of presence. And it's like,
Yeah,
oh, that's what you mean. Just, come in and fill up a room. It's like,
yeah,
oh, get it.
yeah, yeah. So
Hmm.
that's what I wanted to be. When I met people like that, I was like, okay, I want that to be for my life. I want to head in that direction.
Hmm. Okay. So about a specific aspect of yourself, and not everyone, wants to break themselves down this way, but would you like to say anything about how you experience or understand yourself within your gender or as a woman?
Yes, certainly. I think that's been a reasonably significant journey for me as well because my very first job as a peer support worker was in a women's health centre.
Hmm.
And so at that point, I really started to learn a lot about feminism and the history of that and the sort of the struggles that women have gone through to be recognised, I suppose, and to have freedom and choice. And so that's really important to me. I still feel like I carry that baton as strongly as I can to kind of represent that, you know, where women are at right now was pretty hard won and it's not over, you know,
Hmm.
and particularly Indigenous women, like oh, sorry, there goes the lights again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I feel really a sense of responsibility, I suppose, and also gratitude for the feminists that did fight for us to have our choices. And, you know, for me, working is a huge part of my identity, like being a successful, career-driven person. Um, and to be able to be a mum and do that, I think that's worth so much. It
Yeah.
takes a lot. It's really difficult. I've found it very difficult at times being a single mum. It's not the easiest pathway. It's not the most recognised pathway yet. I don't think. You know, I still think we've got some issues around acknowledging how valuable mothering is, how important it is,
Hmm.
and that men can't be mothers. I feel like we need to come to terms with that mums have to be mums. Like they're the ones that, you know, like I, no offense to same-sex couples, nothing at all, but just talking from a heterosexual perspective, I still feel like there's a little bit of looking down on single mums or yeah, not quite valuing what they bring.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, as a woman, mostly I feel really proud to be a woman. I feel really happy. I'm really glad that we've got a lot more sort of gender inclusivity and that we don't have to identify as being, you know, one or the other, male, female. I quite like that whole transgender sort of LGBTI plus stuff. I'm really into that. But yeah, for me, I've met a man that I want to spend the rest of my life with. So I'm happy to be in that kind of, I suppose, heteronormative kind of relationship. But that's just because of who he is and because of what I want. So yeah, I feel lucky to be able to make those choices.
Hmm. Okay. Interesting. So, another question would be sort of expanding a little bit the sense of where you are. Do you feel like you're part of a Gestalt community? I mean, you've
Hmm.
talked about the Indigenous community, the community that you work with, but do you feel like you're part of a Gestalt community?
Yeah, I do. I do. It's a small community
Okay.
where, you know, like I'm just at the point in my life actually where I'd love to be going to Gatla or, you know, and meeting the wider international Gestalt community. I've never had the time or the money to really do that.
Mm.
But unfortunately, that's kind of all been put on pause, obviously, with COVID.
It just
So,
means we can
yeah,
all save up. That's what it's for. It's like a
yeah,
forced savings plan.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's a shame you're not all here in Western Australia because we don't have a single case of COVID here.
Oh.
I know. I wish we could have a conference. But, yeah, so I definitely feel part of a Gestalt community. I have a few really, really good friends that are Gestalt therapists,
Mhm.
and I love how we have conversations. Like, I really get a lot from that. I try and stay in touch with, like Zish and Claudia that I mentioned before. But yeah, I wish there was more happening. Yeah, I wish we could get more happening here. But I'm actually just super grateful that we even have a Gestalt Institute, given that we're this little tiny town in the desert.
You kind of described where I live as well. It's a tiny town in the desert. But Gestalt can be in the strangest of places, so.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I mean, look, when I was doing the training, it wasn't all, it's not all love and joy, is it, doing Gestalt training? Like, there was some clashes and, it was challenging. But I honestly got as much learning out of that, maybe after. It's difficult when you're in it. But, like, really just the richness of those training groups, I think. So, yeah, I don't have an idealized Gestalt community. I don't have like an idea that, and I have tried to join some postgrad groups and it hasn't worked. I've been rejected. But, like, I think that it's a real environment. It's an environment where people may or may not get on. And that's, I think, really healthy. I really quite enjoy that part of it. Otherwise, I guess maybe it feels a little bit like a cult.
That's true. Yeah, it's definitely not conformist, confluent community, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I really appreciate that, actually.
And what comes to mind for you as some of the challenges that you've run up against? And you can answer that sort of in any aspect or any time frame of your life, as a student, as a practitioner, as a person in another part of your life.
Challenges in general or challenges with Gestalt therapy?
Depending on wherever you'd like to take it, that's how you can answer.
Yeah, sure. You're good at asking those kinds of questions.
Yeah, I ask like plural, open-ended, multiple choice questions.
It's such interesting answers that you get, though.
I have no idea what I'm looking for. That's the secret.
Sort it out later.
Yeah, pretty much. Somebody else can do that. But yeah. So what have your challenges been?
Look, I've had plenty of challenges in my life. Like, I grew up in a family that was emotionally and physically damaging. And so, by a young age, like by the time I was 12, I had quite a serious eating disorder, I had anorexia. And that led to what I was talking about before with the psychiatric treatment, which was horrifying. I can't tell you what they did to a 13-year-old girl. It was just, it's mind-blowing. And so, like the punitive sort of treatment approach. Wow. So that just destroyed me as a person. And I didn't have much to work with to begin with. There wasn't much self-esteem there in the beginning. So, by the time I hit adolescence, I really was struggling. And I kind of buried it really deeply because I had no trust at all. So that was really, really difficult and, led to some pretty chaotic years. And, it was really, really challenging, actually. Eventually, that's what transpired to kind of be my career, is that, years later, probably in my late 20s, I became a facilitator for a brand new program that was set up here that was to support women who had eating disorders. And the only prerequisite for the job was basically have a decent personality and have had an eating disorder. And so given that I'd not finished high school, I'd not been to uni, I really didn't have much sort of academic qualifications behind me, I was like, oh, that's perfect. I need a job. I can do that. That's great. I've had an eating disorder. I didn't realize that it was going to be kind of a step towards me really having to kind of process my life and, properly heal, So it ended up becoming like a huge deal for me because now I'm very, very well known as the person that works with people with eating disorders. I've contributed to lots of hospital programs, developed lots of kind of treatment approaches with top psychiatrists here in WA. who kind of value my lived experience combined now with the Gestalt skills. You know, we educate young doctors and psychiatrists, and we kind of bring in, I try and bring in the trauma-informed approach, because obviously that was lacking when I went through treatment.
Yeah.
So my challenges were great, but they also have completely shaped my life somehow. So it's been an interesting journey. And really, I'd done a lot of, well, let's call it recovery work, for one way of expressing it. I'd done a lot of that before I came to Gestalt. So I was really into yoga. I was doing a lot of holistic kind of recovery stuff because I didn't trust the medical profession at all.
Right.
So yeah, I've done a lot of healing work, I suppose, which continues today for me. Like, you know, yoga is still a part of my life. Like walking in nature is a big self-care kind of practice that I use, you know, mindfulness, meditation, that kind of stuff. I found that really, really important. But I didn't have a clue what to do with my emotions. And that's where Gestalt came into it. And
So
yeah.
I'm curious about the eating disorder part in particular.
Yeah.
What was like your biggest understanding that you bring to your work, having gone through that experience and done your own process?
I think my biggest sort of point would be, look, that the eating behaviours, the self-harm behaviours are all a symptom of serious personal distress. So what's happened to that person? We need to take the time to listen and ask and explore, and to make it safe enough for them to trust us to even talk about that or even think about that. Because most of the people I've worked with, once you kind of start to actually have a conversation, the eating side of things is so small compared to what's happened to kind of destabilize them to the point where it even seems like a good idea to do that sort of self-punishment. And I think that that's something that's still maybe early days for the eating disorder profession. Like they still really focus on meal plans and weighing the person and, you know, medications, I suppose. And that's all important, but it's nowhere near as important as actually listening to that person and finding out what's happened for them and how do they see themselves and what do they kind of feel about what they're doing. Yeah, so it's about taking the time and not rushing in and sort of putting everyone in a similar category, because everyone's got their unique story. I mean, everyone, you, me, we've all got our unique stories for whatever's shaped our decisions. And yeah, I think it's just too easy to come in and say to someone that, you know, the clinical team has the answer, when it's a lot more complicated than that.
It was, I like your answer. I'm very interested in that area as well. So, okay. So another question that I have, which it's sort of the flip side, but it's not really, of the challenges, is what comes to mind as one of the greatest moments or memories or highlights within your experience? And again, this can be in your life, in your practice, however you'd like to take it.
Well, I can't get past the day that I graduated Gestalt. That was like epic for me, because I think I said before, you know, I hadn't managed to finish uni. I've studied social work a couple of times and never quite got there. And I didn't finish high school. And I was so determined to finish Gestalt psychotherapy that that graduation was a big day for me. I still clearly remember, I can still feel it. I carry that feeling with me, like I did it. So yeah, I was really proud of that and really, really glad for that. Meeting or getting together with my partner now that I have, like he's the love of my life. It's taken me a very long time to meet the person that I really, really connect with. And so I guess the day that he asked me to marry him was pretty significant, because that's exactly what I want to do. And that That was also a little bit put on hold with COVID this year. So I'm just breathing through that and trusting the process that it'll happen eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's right. I mean, COVID's interrupted a few things this year, hasn't it? But, I've still got the wedding to look forward to.
And I am actually wondering, because sometimes I sort of let this slide, but then I'm noticing that when people do answer, like a highlight or one of the really sort of gratifying, satisfying moments clinically, there's some really beautiful experiences. Does anything come to mind as like a Gestalt practitioner highlight or a moment from your work with a client?
Yeah, look, I have to be honest, Heather, it's pretty much every day that I am blown away. So at the moment, I'm not so much working with clients. I'm more managing a team of support workers. And within our organisation, I like to see myself anyway as the go-to in-house therapist. So anyone that's kind of having anything happen for them that they want to talk about, they can just make a time and come and see me. So it's not officially therapy. It's kind of like, I don't know, coordination or something. But really, what I'm doing is providing support for people whenever they need it. And I'm also, I spend a lot of time with my team, sort of challenging them, trying to increase their awareness, boost their confidence, I guess mentor them in some ways. And most people haven't heard of Gestalt work here in Australia anyway, or in Perth. So they don't necessarily know that I mean, they might now, they might watch this, but they don't necessarily
They're
know.
going to figure out, they're going to be on to you. They're going to know what you're doing to them.
But basically, yeah, I'm just always doing secret Gestalt.
Okay.
And it's fantastic. It's just like, it means that I can work, like in my organization, there's about 200 people and they all do really incredible work. And so I work with all of them. Like we all have relationships. It's quite profound to think that I could have so many relationships with so many people in such different sort of formats and things. So I really put that down to Gestalt. Like I can sit and I can listen to someone and I can make a contact and then we can get on and do some work. And that is often very, very satisfying and very fulfilling and often leads to amazing kind of outcomes. So my work is often in organisational sort of pathways, so developing programs or kind of coming up with new ideas, things that we can try to do differently. And yeah, I love it. I love it. That's a day-to-day kind of satisfaction that I have that is directly linked to Gestalt sort of principles, practices.
Okay. So I guess really the last question that I have would be where you're going with all of this. What's next? Do you have a particular project or, thing in mind? And also, where do you think Gestalt could or should be going?
Yeah, so my immediate project here is to expand the peer workforce throughout our whole organisation. So traditionally we would have peer workers, so those people that would disclose some of their life challenges as part of their approach. They would be in the mental health teams only, but I've started to introduce the notion that we could have them in the women's refuges and in the homelessness centre and in the mental health law centre and within the hospitals with eating disorder clients. And I just feel like we can, I'm really quite keen to expand the peer workforce, which will mean a lot of training and a lot of liaising, which will be digging deep on the Gestalt skills, yeah, because I've got to kind of convince people that it's a good idea, but also experiment.
That's kind of like a humanizing process.
Yeah,
it's
a humanizing process.
If you're not bringing your own experiences to any of that work, how are you doing it?
Yeah, but like the majority of the sort of current psychological training would say don't share anything about your own personal vulnerabilities, yeah? So it's quite a clash, it's quite a reformist sort of process. One of my close friends calls peer work a social justice activity, because you're basically kind of suggesting what is wrong with being human, what is wrong with sharing some of those aspects of our life challenges in order to help someone else, you know. So yeah, so I'm really excited about that. I really like the idea of, it's basically one big experiment, essentially, peer work.
Great.
Yeah. So that's immediate, and then long term, I have the plan to leave the city and go and live down in the countryside, in the bush down south, and have a quiet, peaceful life, grow lots of vegetables, and maybe get a horse. But I think that my work will continue down there, and one small passion that is sort of increasing actually the more I listen to these interviews that you've been conducting, is to set up another small Gestalt Institute that, you know, because Western Australia is gigantic, you know, it's absolutely huge. And so at the moment we have the one that's Perth-based, but I'd quite like to go and set one up down south, which is 5-6 hours drive away, and somehow find a way to make Gestalt affordable so that people can study these skills. Maybe it's a lesser course, I don't know. I don't know exactly what this is going to look like, but it's just something I'm really recognising that it was a huge financial commitment for me to make, and I'm so glad that I made it. But I would say there's some people that can't quite get there, and I'd love for them to have a way to learn some of the Gestalt principles. So I'm kind of currently looking at how I can almost map the principles of peer work onto the theoretical framework of Gestalt, and then kind of give more credibility to what the Gestalt aspect is, and then somehow include it in a training course. Just so that more people can be aware of what's possible, really.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that, and that it is based not on a business model, so hopefully it'll work out for you, but on a principle.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of young people, that's one thing I would say, Heather, is that maybe we're lacking young people in this field a little bit. I don't know I don't know what it's like in other countries, but if it costs a lot to get trained, then you've probably already qualified in something, and you've probably already got a professional career happening.
You've already jumped through a lot of hoops.
Yeah,
and got a lot of points, and
Yeah, so one thing that I haven't mentioned is how passionate I am about young people, and how much I think we need to invest in them, because, wow, they're inheriting some problems, hey, that I feel personally responsible for. I feel like my generation and the one above didn't really look after them. So I feel very passionate about them having a voice and having some power behind them. So yeah, any skills that I could sort of impart to younger people to help them with what they're going to have to deal with.
And this is another question, going back to what you said initially. Sorry, just can you hold your mic off? I think it's rubbing against something there because you're getting a lot of noise. That's okay. Do you have any possibilities or interest or requests from the Indigenous community, the Aboriginal community, to get involved with Gestalt? I mean, is that something that's culturally compatible, or would that be like another colonial project, or how do you see that relationship?
Yeah, well, that is something that I would love to explore, Heather. I would love to explore how we could kind of merge I would respectfully like to offer what I know. And I sort of think that there's an opening for that. Like, I already work with some Indigenous women who run a refuge, and they respond really well to my style. I think it's the style. I think it's, for Aboriginal people, what I gather is they like to take the time to talk about things and listen to one another and think about things. They're nowhere near as fast and kind of, progress driven as the kind of white world.
Mhm.
And I think it's the style that could really
So
work.
dialogical versus CBT.
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah. And just taking that time to kind of really think about it, hear it out, not rush to conclusions, not rush to make change, let change sort
Mhm.
of happen over time, um, learn from one another, that kind of thing. I think a lot of the basic principles of the way that we do Gestalt in therapy can also be applied to working with groups of Aboriginal people in whatever setting, whether it's education, whether it's therapeutic work. Um, I think there's probably a bit of both there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm just curious because here in Mexico, I'm sort of doing started a call for proposals this afternoon on issues around race and looking at the way that psychotherapy is separated from Indigenous culture, Indigenous traditions, and Indigenous thought. And I'm hearing echoes of that in Canada, in Mexico, and now talking about the Aboriginal situation in Australia. I'm
Mm.
just wondering. I have no formed thoughts. I'm just wondering what happens, when those different kinds of things meet. So,
Yeah. I think traditionally psychotherapy would probably be one of the um, institutional approaches that damaged Aboriginal people, the same as like social workers, unfortunately, for all their good work, they
yeah,
destroyed.
they
Yeah,
intervened in social systems
yeah,
that were
exactly.
fine.
Yeah. So I think it's all about, again, it's about taking the time to
Hmm.
explain and maybe even rename or rebrand, or I don't know how relevant Gestalt psychotherapy is, but the principles that lie inside of it are very relevant.
Hmm.
So I think it's that, again, it's the decolonizing, it's the
Yeah.
unpacking of all of it and seeing what's left and what's necessary and what's useful.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's interesting. Maybe we can keep in touch about it. You can let me know what you learn and I'll let you know what I learn.
Sounds fair. Maybe we can visit somewhere in some desert.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
awesome.
Okay. So is there anything that you would like to add? Anything you feel like we've left out here that you wanted to expand on, or?
Wow, it's a really interesting experience being interviewed and trying to say something intelligent, in a room by yourself.
Yeah, you got that down. Not a problem.
Yeah, it's strange. I'm sure there'll be things I think of later, but at the same time, it's been really nice talking with you. And more than anything, it's just lovely to be able to kind of reflect on how significant Gestalt psychotherapy has been in my life. Like I honestly don't think I'd be here. I certainly wouldn't be the dynamic, kind of inspired person that I am without the Gestalt therapy support that I had. So it's nice just to sort of give that some credit and to contribute a little bit to the international community. And I guess to say thanks to everyone that kind of kept it alive over these years and passed the wisdom on.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you. It's been really, really lovely to meet you, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, lovely to meet you too. Thanks so much, Heather.